Practical experience of the same. Winner of several prestigious fellowships with
Your mic is off, I think. Hello, good afternoon. You have turned off your mic.
I think you have some network issue.
Yes, madam, you are not audible. Thank you.
Are we audible to the audience?
Now you are. Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
But I couldn't listen to even a single word what Madam Kalidevi was speaking. I'm sorry.
Professor Rashmi Malik, please go ahead with your presentation.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible? Professor Aniras? Am I audible?
या तो यहाँ mic लगा दो. Ma'am, could you please wait for a few minutes? We need
Okay.
to fix certain things. We need to fix the audio. I
Okay.
deeply regret all this. Okay, ma'am,
Okay.
please continue.
Can I speak now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much. I congratulate the organizers for this academic congregation and extend my heartfelt thanks for providing me this platform. I extend my warmest regards to Professor Daya, all esteemed academicians, worthy scholars, incredible organizing team and their participants. I am going to speak on the topic Conscience and Concurrence, the Soliloquies in William Shakespeare's Hamlet. In literature, drama possesses the unique quality of putting together elements of performing and non-performing arts while recreating a scene of life for its audience. Several techniques are used by the playwright for an effective exposition of a storyline with faithful representation of characters. In Greek drama, the chorus was used and direct speeches were inscribed to the audience. The Shakespearean characters resort to soliloquies to reveal the dramatis personae in early modern drama. A soliloquy is defined as a common device by which a dramatic character alone on the stage reveals feelings, thoughts, and motives in speech to the audience. Shakespeare explains the purpose of a soliloquy in his play himself, All is Well that Ends Well. Here the steward informs the countess that he has heard Helena talking to herself as if her words were meant for her own ears only and not for a stranger. It further indicates that a character voices own ideas, thoughts, or emotions in a personal conflict to understand or to justify or just to accept or reject the situation. Then, in this case, an eavesdropper is listening to it, and this undesirable listener is the coach, who can be an unintentional listener, or an alert, precise observant, or it may be a calculated, conscious speech by the soliloquist, beguiling others, including audience. Whatever be the case, the Shakespearean soliloquies have been appreciated on the folio, in the theatre, and on the screen, transporting their literary, dramatic, and cinematic potential. Further, Shakespeare's soliloquies are deliberately theatrical and consciously aware of their dramatic setting, sometimes breaking the fourth wall between actor and audience, but always playing with the idea of what seems and what doesn't seem. I quote from Henry. Alexander Newell, in his book The Soliloquies in Hamlet, suggests that, I quote, sometimes a soliloquy reveals subconscious mental conflict in the subtext of the language of the soliloquist, conveying aspects of the character hidden from himself. It is the periodic revolution of character's mind in soliloquy that gives a sense of encountering the character's truest self, unquote. Such a sincere representation of human lives that Percy Shelley calls sounds more real than living man in his poem The Poet's Dream. And Harold Bloom writes a book on the artistic representation of human characters, Shakespeare, the invention of the human, and discusses how human beings discern and determinate various situations using their conscience, as noted by Samuel Johnson, that Shakespeare's chief skill was in human actions, passions, and habits. Johnson further submits that diverse characters in different situations exhibit love, hatred, hopes, fears, friendship, animosity, faithfulness, and tragedy in real life situations that are accepted as authentic representation of human lives. By definition, a character articulates one's mind for oneself in a soliloquy, and by convention, the person speaks truth as it is about one's conscience. Hamlet the play heavily relies on language as a trope, making it one of Shakespeare's loneliest plays. As we know, the play has 4,042 lines, and the character of Hamlet speaks 1,476 lines of them. The multiple soliloquies that Hamlet gives an insight into uh, character, characters also provide a progressive character development of Hamlet. Uh, Bloom states regarding this that in Shakespeare, characters develop because they reconceive themselves, because they overhear themselves, talking to self or to others. The relative and philosophical matter with the dramatic, circumstantial delivery of the lines attracts immense attention. Stephen Reed analyzes that first soliloquy of Hamlet exhibited 4 out of 5 signs of melancholia, beginning with, "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt." Hamlet demonstrates suicidal tendencies and loss of interest in worldly things. But being a Christian, he is forbidden from killing himself, as the church strictly regarded self-slaughter as the precautionary sixth commandment. To the first four lines, Shakespeare also compares the paradox of material life and spiritual death. The first soliloquy links the two former scenes of the play through references to Hamlet Senior and Claudius, as Hamlet juxtaposes both through imagery of Hyperion and Satyr, respectively. As assortment of the wealthier royal brother, Hyperion, the Titan god of the sun, symbolizes enlightenment, while Satyr, half-beast woman, who accompanies Dionysus, represents a lascivious and overindulgent lifestyle. The analogy targets Claudius' promiscuous engagements, his hypocrisy owing to his dual nature and his cowardly behavior as only half a man. Jenkins further analyzes that Hamlet's task as bestowed by his father is not merely to vengeful murder, but to kill a satyr and restore the throne to a Hyperion, thereby correcting the rotten state of Denmark. Hamlet's recollection of his father's affection of the past, Stephen Greenblatt reviews in Hamlet in Purgatory in his book, it comes as an uninvited source of torture in the present when he remembers his father's affection for him and for his mother. The materialized ghost in war, instead of the crusted body of a poisoned man, and abstract memories are manifestations of a liberated nostalgia which serves as an excruciating reminder of the magnitude. His religious and scholarly knowledge is reinforced as he contrasts the triple mourning of his mother with Niobe, the queen of Thebes, as a symbol of eternal mourning. He accuses her of shedding unrighteous tears and apathies with his generalized statement, "Frailty by name is woman." Anne Thompson and Neil Taylor states in the Arden edition that the misogyny was customary, nothing unusual about it in Shakespearean time. Frailty by name is woman was proverbial in Shakespeare's time too, though it may be worded differently. However, it may have another perspective that is Hamlet's love for his mother despite everything, and in a way the frailty of her being a woman justifies her being well pushed by a man who happens to be a monarch too. Thompson and Taylor call measure for measure. Here Isabella describes women as terrorized prey when resisting Angelo's threats and showcases her threat. That Isabella spurns Angelo's blackmailing advances. It indicates Shakespearean women are frail, yes, but physically, yet their decisions may be purposeful. Returning to Hamlet, Eliot criticized the first soliloquy for its exaggerated emotions, whereas Robert Justine, a feminist critic, reviewed it for its misogynistic nature, stating, "Nowhere is Shakespearean sex hatred expressed more openly than in the way he called Hamlet." The narrative does not depend primarily, not all and everything depends on the soliloquies for depiction of action and the advancement of the plot, but relies on it for the demonstration of the interior thoughts in relation to the external happenings. The first soliloquy is set before his meeting with his father's ghost and exhibits his reluctant recollections. As the play progresses, his denial to address his skepticism towards his current circumstances develops further into inaction over the thoughts leading to another famous soliloquy, to be or not to be. That is the question. It raises more than one question, and every question has more than one satisfactory answer. Whether Hamlet's to be or not to be is indeed a soliloquy which Hamlet speaks to himself, or it is a calculated performance which Hamlet delivers while knowing that he is being overheard. There are various interpretations and different ways of how it should be staged, depending on where the focus lies, whether it is a personal dilemma and Hamlet's contemplation of suicide, or take it as a purple patch. That, taking a cue from the euphemism metaphors poignancy of expression in the soliloquy. It addresses contrivance and deception. Critics like Limbo claims that in this soliloquy, Hamlet knows that he is being overheard by Claudius and Polonius, and therefore it is not an authentic outpouring of the conscience, but a deliberate contrivance on the part of Hamlet to convince others that he is mad and contemplating suicide. August Wilhelm Schlegel calls it a tragedy of thought, inspired by continual and never satisfied meditation. That is another aspect. That it is, if it is related to one's mind, to one's conscious, then does it relate to meditation too? On human destiny and the dark perplexity of the events of this world, and calculated to call forth the very same meditation in the minds of the spectators. This soliloquies enables Hamlet to express his thoughts to himself, to understand authentic self better. A talk to his conscience in using the language of theatre. The power of theatricality provokes an emotional response from the audience and the readers. They understand some of it. And this enigma strengthens and it becomes a vehicle to influence the thoughts of others, though it stays inscrutable in certain ways, because people think that Hamlet is, nobody can understand the mind of Hamlet. And it renders problematic the notion of soliloquy as a device which seems talking to conscience in one situation, a contrivance to influence others in the same situation or another, and may take the speaker and the audience to a meditative world in another situation. Uh, Fish has analyzed and he highlights that Hamlet's soliloquies in Shakespeare's play Hamlet closely resemble the inner rhetorical structure found in meditative practices. They share a threshold of threefold structure: descriptive, uh, an act of memory, analytical, or dialectical power, and vow a resolution for it. Both Hamlet's meditations and contemporary meditation techniques involve purposeful introspection, problem solving, and resolution, while Hamlet's soliloquies are not explicitly theological like traditional meditation. They share an existential posture, intense purpose, and awareness of moral imperatives. This makes them dramatic compositions focused on inner dialogues rather than mere essays. Unlike familiar essays, Hamlet's soliloquies hint at dramatic relationship and colloquy, adding depth to his character and the play's narrative. I am quote. So we can say that Shakespearean soliloquies, while they are a kind of catharsis also, but there is a kind of self-reflection, self-discovery, and expression of inner feelings and thoughts. Uh, this is the idea that it connects it with that Harold Fish also connects it with the fact that Hamlet admires Stoicism, a philosophical movement that places an emphasis on self-control, objectivity, and emotional distance as ways to deal with life's hardship. Though it is contended that despite Hamlet's adventure for the Stoic ideal, he eventually falls short of living up to it, and he struggles with his intense feelings and uncertainties and in anguish throughout the play, despite his attempts to maintain emotional distance and reason. Uh, so, uh, so the Soliloquies brings out the distinction between what we say vulva dia, that is the meaning, and the inner state, the states. The term used by Derrida, there is a kind of tension between what the speaker wants to say and what he utters. There is always a difference that postpones the desired expression of self-presence, which equates with consciousness. The words announced in the speech are not necessarily authentic because of the difference that exists between what one says and what one really wants to say. So Hamlet is so frustrated initially at his inability to
Professor
express.
Malik, you're not audible.
Oh my God!
We lost
Really?
you.
Okay.
No,
Hello? Am I audible now?
no, ma'am, you're not audible as yet.
So it has happened only now, or earlier I was audible?
No, ma'am, not yet. Not audible as yet.
Oh my God, I have been speaking for so long. What is this? Okay. Oh my God. So, no, begin again.
We
Am I
lost you
audible
for
again?
like 2-3 minutes only. For the, earlier you were audible. It's since last 2-3 minutes that we lost you.
Okay. So am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't know from where should I start this. So I conclude it now. Friends, there are no states in Shakespeare's language. The sense that it constitutes a quantum leap in the development of English poetry and drama is widely shared. Some will say the later achievements lay ahead, but in that case, Hamlet was an essential preparation for them. Unquote. The whole idea of dramatic character is changed forever by this play. To take him as the herald of new age is neither idolatry nor hyperbolical. This new mastery has become the mastery of ambiguous, the unexpected, of conflicting evidence and identity. We are challenged to make sense from all, whether it is spoken as a part of conscience, contrivance, meditation, or simply propagation of a thought, though we may understand or we may fail to understand the real reason for that. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience also. I'm happy to answer if there are any questions.
You finished? I'm like there is some problem. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And thank you for your wonderful insights on the topic. And may I now invite
Uh, Now you are not audible. Hello?
is Professor Donald McManus with us? I request him to kindly take over and make his presentation.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible. Welcome.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you
yes.
for inviting me. Sorry? Thank you for inviting me. It's been 20 years since I have been into India. Unfortunately, I could not come in person because I am in Melbourne, Australia, in rehearsals for a play by William Shakespeare called The Merchant of Venice. And I'm going to start by referring to that play. I'm going to refer to some lines of Shakespeare's that are not very famous to begin with. The Prince of Aragon is one of the dummies one usually thinks of in that play. He picks the wrong casket. Just to remind you, there are 3 caskets, and the suitors come for Portia's hand, and there's lead, silver, and gold. And the lead casket has an inscription on it that says, "Who chooseth me shall risk everything, all he has." And the silver casket says, "Shall get as much as he deserves," and the gold casket says, "Shall gain what every man desires." The Prince of Morocco comes, picks gold, goes away, and then the Prince of Aragon comes in. The audience might not know which casket has the picture of Portia and the prize in it. The Prince of Aragon reads the inscription, "Who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves." And then he says, "And well said too, for who shall go about to cozen fortune and be honorable without the stamp of merit? Let none presume to wear an undeserved dignity." And then he goes on to explain, "Oh, that estates, degrees, and offices were not derived corruptly," and speaks very wise words, I would suggest, that hint at a meritocracy, a world that is not divided by social classes, etc. Unfortunately, at the end of all of this, he ends with, I will assume dessert. So he contradicts his very opening sentence, which is to wear an undeserved dignity. He's assuming he deserves what he's. So it's both wise words on the one hand, but it's a joke on the other hand. And I would suggest to you, my big point today is that when we read, a lot of the words of Shakespeare are very famous, and school children all know them. And in the same play, a much more famous speech is Portia's later in the play at the trial scene. She says, the quality of mercy is not strained. So my argument is that these quotable words of Shakespeare are almost always in context of the play. And if you read her famous lines in the context of some of the earlier lines that we forget about, such as the speech I was just reading from the Prince of Aragon, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis the mightiest of the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power. She's sort of paraphrasing what Aragon said earlier about justice and equality and all these things that we just get all jazzed about and say, yes, go Shakespeare. Unfortunately, then she goes down to, it is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show likes gods when mercy seasons justice. Wow, what an ending. Unfortunately, that line's not finished. She there goes on to say, therefore, Jew, and she doesn't use Shylock's name, she just calls him a Jew, and then is warning him, he better be merciful or else, which is a different kind of a meaning. And those of you who know the play know that later she uses his otherness, his foreignness to the state of Venice against him. And so all the poetry and wisdom in the beautiful lines that children all know, the quality of mercy is not strained, kind of dissolve when we watch the injustice as it plays out in the play. We heard from Rashmi Malik earlier a lot from Hamlet, and I thought I would also zero in on probably the most famous words of Shakespeare, to be or not to be, etc. But before we get there, I'd like to point, there's another very famous, at least line, which is, thou canst, this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. It's kind of aphorism that people all know. Be true to yourself, and then you won't be a liar. But we forget that those words are spoken by Polonius. This is very early in the play. And the whole speech is full of him giving advice to Laertes before he goes off to France and to study. And the whole speech is kind of a comic speech. It begins with, yet here, Laertes, aboard, for shame, the wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There, my blessing with thee. So you're going to miss your plane. You got to hurry. And well, just before you go, let me say a lot of platitudes to you. So he's saying, why are you still here? You're late. And then he repeats all these things, ending with, above all, to thine own self be true, and thou canst not be false to any man, which is the one bit of the speech that we all remember. But in the context, it's from a very duplicitous man. And my big point here is pay attention to what happens next. Laertes leaves, and Polonius is left with Ophelia, to whom he is very cruel at that moment. And I would suggest, most of us know the play Hamlet. If we know one Shakespeare play, that's probably the one we've read. And that is a play with almost all victims. Most of the characters are dead at the end, but Ophelia is probably the least guilty of anyone in this play, and she is the victim. And when we read To Be or Not to Be, again, referring back to the previous speaker who spoke a little bit about when a character is alone on stage speaking to themselves, to what extent they're aware of an audience. The whole To Be or Not to Be soliloquy is debated. Does Hamlet know that people are listening to him? not only the audience, but later in the play he says, "Now I am alone," and then gives a big long speech. But in this case, he just walks out. To be or not to be, that is the question. We all debate this endlessly. What is this all about? Sometimes people forget the way that speech ends. He says all the pseudo-philosophy bits and then says, "The fair Ophelia, nymph in thy orisons, be all my sins remembered." Orisons meaning her prayers. So he's admitting that he is a flawed human who needs the prayers of this young woman who he presumably has a relationship with, and if he has any hope of getting to heaven. So all of his speaking about destiny and life on earth and death and fear of death and possible suicide is is couched in the fact that he's next talking to Ophelia, and those of you who know the play know he is very, very cruel to her in the scene that follows. When we know later that she takes her own life, she does what he seems to be considering in this very speech. That becomes kind of damning of our hero, but we still care for him because that's how Shakespeare works. He spreads the empathy around very liberally, I would suggest. So my big point is, don't lose my bias is as an actor. I like the theater. I'm a musician. I'm a director. I'm an actor. And so Shakespeare writes these very seductive words. He's a word guy. But it's dangerous if we pluck out the words from the context and repeat them as wisdom. They're only wise in the context of what happens in the rest of the play and the action. A good example of this, I think, is As You Like It. Jaques' very, very famous lines: "All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts." We've all heard this repeated over and over again. I've seen it's often written on the theater I used to work at, the Shakespeare Theater, had it as a plaque as you walked in the theater. So Shakespeare here seems to be comparing life to the theater, but poorly. So it's just theater. And in Jaques' speech, he diminishes every character who walks into his speech. The baby is mewling and puking. Those of us who love children might think of a baby as something that it's a fond thing one holds in one's arms. But Jaques says mewling and puking. And the schoolboy going unwillingly to school is another phrase that Jaques used. Well, those of us who know about Shakespeare, he was lucky enough to get an education. That's why he becomes a great playwright, whereas his father was semi-literate. So he probably likes school, yeah, and etc. Finally ending with that the cycle of life leads back to the old man, turning again to childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. So it's a bleak, bleak vision of age. Older, you get old and then you're toothless, you're back to being a baby again. Isn't that depressing? What we have to remember is this entire speech is upstaged in the next moment in the play when our hero, who is not so good at speaking, Orlando, we know he's not good with words. He's just a man of action, and he walks in holding an old man in his arms. And I would suggest that in this case, the action trumps all of the words. So if we quote these words as wise words from Shakespeare telling us about how life starts as mewling and puking and ends up much the same, we're missing the entire point. The point is that these words are made false by the action of the hero. And I don't know about in India, but when I was a kid in Canada, they still, the Jakes, which is this character's name, Jaques, is in British slang, he's referred to as Jakes, which means the toilet. And it was still at construction sites, you would see the privy would have written on it, Jakes. So I think it's maybe that was that meaning even in Shakespeare's day. So he's a big mouth who talks a lot, unlike Orlando, who does stuff. And that's why our heroine loves him. Yes. The other tip-off is that people are always pointing to speeches where the theater is mocked by the speaker, or clowns are mocked. Oh, that's nothing but a fool saying this, whatever it is. And in fact, this first speech that I referred to from the Prince of Aragon, when he opens the casket, of course, Portia's picture is not in it. He pulls out an image that is of a fool, a blinking idiot. Yes, and then and his last lines are, with one fool's head I came to woo, but I go away with two, which is a good laugh line on the one hand, but is also marking him as a fool. And in Shakespeare's plays, fools frequently speak wisdom, but they're still fools. They're still not, they don't have the merit of other characters, but they are wise, and you ignore what they say at your peril, I would suggest. And I will close with the most famous example of this being Macbeth. Being a theater guy, I always get a little nervous whenever I say the word Macbeth because of the bad luck associated with using that word, but if you're quoting it, it's allowable. The famous lines, of course, are tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury signifying nothing. And this is often quoted as wisdom, like I say. But the tip-off is he's mocking a fool, a theatrical fool, and saying life is no better than the theater. We forget about, it's frequently quoted without the opening lines to the speech, which he has just found out that his Lady Macbeth is dead. And his opening lines of that speech are actually, she should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word, which means, I don't have time for this, I'm busy. Which is not what a husband ought to say when he hears that his wife has passed away. Yes? And then he goes on to say, nah, life doesn't really count anyway. I would suggest to you that this is what all psychopaths say. All professional killers, when they're on trial and they're going to face restitution, justice, they usually say, nah, what difference does it make? So, in fact, it's not wise words, I would suggest. And in the same play, Macduff, who is about to cut Macbeth's head off in another few pages, when he hears that his wife has been murdered by Macbeth's henchmen, his army dudes, and his children have been slaughtered in what we would today call a war crime, he cries womanly tears instead of saying, I'm busy, I got So that just the difference in the action, or the acting in that case, the actor playing Macduff has to emote, which trumps the words he uses. We don't remember the exact words, but we do remember Macbeth's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow speech as if it's wisdom. This is an error, I would suggest. So the topic of our conference is about the big speeches and the famous lines. And I'm not saying there isn't wisdom locked in when Portia says the quality of mercy is not strained. That's a wise thing to say, but in the context, it's problematic. So be careful when you hear wise words. They may come back to bite you. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you for inviting me. If I have any, I'm happy to answer some questions. I hope you can hear.
The forum is now open for question and answers. Does anybody has any question? The forum is now open to questions. Does anybody has a question? Is it also audible to you? There's a question from one of the participants. Is it audible to you?
No, I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Please come in. Leave the mic. Leave the mic. Good afternoon, sir. Is it possible? My question is, you being a theatre artist, are the roles like as complex as Hamlet's or the role of an obstinate Jew like Shylock in Merchant of Venice or Jake's speeches? Are these gender specific? Like if females play these roles, so do they bring out the same emotions on the stage or would they fail to draw the attention? I hope you have got the point.
Well, it's a fascinating place to go. Obviously, Shakespeare uses the idea of gender a lot in his plays, usually the comedies. But we have to remember that only men could perform on stage as often, and so he uses that as a device to make a comment about the stupidity of arbitrary gender ideas. And I always argue that although there are no women performing, they're in the audience. The women, and we know that the women went to the audience a lot. So he is writing to a woman's ear. I think that's fair to say. And so if we want to, it's not our modern feminist obsession that we read things into the play. That's legitimate because he likes to speak to the audience. And frequently at the end of As You Like It, Rosalind says, she speaks directly to the audience and says, men, women, and she's speaking to, look at each other and think, what's this about? A good example would also be Taming of the Shrew, when Petruchio turns to the audience and says, who here knows better how to tame a shrew? I would suggest that's a comic line where he's riffing with the audience and sort of like teasing the audience and the bad couples that might exist in the audience. Whereas when Hamlet says, to be or not to be, that is the question. He doesn't want an answer from the audience. That would ruin the play. But, so I think your question is, I don't have an answer other than it's a valid question, if that makes sense. So, so go in there and muck it up.
So, another point to be discussed with you. Stage actors, they can live a normal life. They have a normal background. If they are asked to play the roles of kings and queens, their own personality comes in. They are able to play the role of a king or a queen. When in the normal life, they are living a very normal and a simple life. Like they are not kings and queens in their normal life. But when they are asked to play, their own personality comes in. Please elaborate.
It's an act of imagination, obviously, and actors are using their own experience, of course, but they're also ideal. When an actor emotes on stage, for instance, if I'm playing Hamlet or Lear, for example, who's a king at the beginning, but his arc of discovery is he becomes more like the audience as he loses power. So we love him more the more he is like us. And so an actor is listening to the play as they tell it to the audience and is affected by that, as opposed to pretending they're actually a king from some other century, which is limited in its usefulness. But you want to find out as much as you can, details-wise, about what it might be to be a soldier or be something that you've never experienced. But ultimately, you're telling a story, and that's the important thing, is you're conveying a story and listening. The beauty of live theater is you listen to the audience hearing the story as you tell it, and that affects you. So it's the public, cumulative, shared experience that's the important thing, and so that's why so many traditions associate theater with spirituality. Actually, so it's the shared event, and the personal is important, but it doesn't trump everything else. So it doesn't matter if I was never a prince, I could imagine how to tell his story anyway. And there's a lot of royalty that made bad actors. So, but yeah, I hope that helps. I was an acting teacher for years, so I could talk too much about that dangerous subject to get into. Thank you for inviting me. Hope next time I can come to India. I miss it.
Thank you, Dr. McManus, for giving us such a lucid analysis of Shakespeare's Soliloquies from the perspective of a theatre artist. You have explained eloquently how the characters of a fool or clown have delivered the most meaningful messages in the Shakespearean Soliloquies. Thank you so much, sir. I now request Professor Ramnivas to proceed with this presentation. Professor Ramnivas, Dr. Ramnivas, sorry.
Yes, my audience. Good afternoon to everybody. I thank all the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present the paper. The chapter book, and I'll be right thing. As our previous speaker has already told us that Shakespeare puts life and theatre together, and it's fact, of course, and has been mentioned if you like it. So, life in theatre, of course, there's no difference because Shakespeare, of course, portrays life, kind of, life and theatre together, and it's kind of, that's why this is his ability to weave kind of, intricate narratives and breathe life into character of profound depth, as he himself, as I said, that says that this world is all the world is stage, and men and women are the actors on it, and or players actually. So that's why life is just like that. Shakespearean life or stage, they were put together actually. So this is the brilliance of Shakespeare. You will not find in any other Demetrius plays actually. So Shakespeare's enduring legacy is a kind of testament to his exceptional skill as a kind of playwright and poet, forever influencing the course of the dramatic literature across generations. Within the vast tapestry of Shakespeare's enduring the theatrical works, one character has consistently captivated the audiences for centuries. That is Richard III. Even when Shakespeare was writing or alive, actually during his time also, this Richard III was very, very popular actually, and it was in high demand, and people actually always used to love to watch this play actually. So that's why, and this soliloquy, of course, this very kind of important. I'll come to that. So the founded the kind of heart of the eponymous play, Richard III. This kind of character emerges as a complex enigma, intriguing for beguiling and unequal measures. To unravel the intricacies of Richard III's character, just going to analyze, Machiavellian's views actually on the basis of Machiavellian views, and how this soliloquy actually becomes an example that how at the same time he is also a kind of disability, and how he always imagines that his disability is the that the society hates actually, and that's why he is not loved or he is not attractive, because he is disabled. He's hunchbacked and lame. Uh, I mean, it's very different sort of character actually, and people can laugh at him. Even dogs, bark at him when he, is with them actually. So that's why this opening soliloquy, that commences with the evocative declaration that now is the winter our this country. First of all, see this Richard III actually was written just after Henry VI, and continuously, there were plays actually. I will not mention those. But in sixth itself, Richard said that, I will become king. I'm not quoting him here, but he already, killed, Lancaster's people, Duke of Lancaster, John of Gaunt, and of course, Anne's father and husband both, whom he plans to marry actually. So let me read out the first soliloquy. It's not a very big one. And if you will understand the soliloquy, of course, you will be able to understand the interpretation of the soliloquy. Um, First character actually in Shakespearean plays, who is a kind of monologue actually. So he says, because York emerges as a victorious over Lancaster, and so now this is time to enjoy. But is Richard III able to enjoy this? No, he's not. So why he gives his reasons actually. So now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer into the son of York, because Edward IV is now ruling. He is brother of Richard III. And all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean, um, ocean buried, now our brows bound with victorious uh, wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our grateful marches to delightful measures. A grim visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbered steeds to fright souls, he kept he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of lute. But I, that am not shaped. See, this is the change, of course. So far, he was, appreciating, and he just, talked about his, about York and about Edward IV, actually. But now he is revealing his own mind that he is not able to enjoy these pleasures of victory, actually. And so that's why, he says, and this is the kind of, change. You can see the change in his attitude actually, and how he tries to become, or he becomes actually a villain or cruel, very cruel actually. But I that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court not to make quote amorous looking glass, I that am rudely stamped and won't love's majesty to stud before a wanton ambling nymphs. I that am curtailed of this fair proportion, because he is telling us about his disability and that unnaturalness. That's what is a problem for him, and because he thinks that he is disabled and he has been discriminated, that's why he is not able. He is not attractive as well, and he is not appreciated by any lady, any woman, or he doesn't have any social status. So that's why, because he said that I am not made of this kind of proportion, actually, fair proportion. Cheated for features by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world, scarce half made up, and that so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why? I in this world, weak piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time, unless spy my shadows in the sun and descant on mine own deformity. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover, to entertain these fair broken days, I am determined to prove a villain. So see that because he thinks that he is a disabled person, he is kind of therefore he cannot be immorous with any kind of lady, and therefore he determines to become a villain. See, this is kind of Shakespearean interpretation of Richard, of course, that because he is not able to make any place in the society does not like him, or kind of no lady likes him, and that's why he determines to become a villain. This is not kind of a real thing actually, but even modern day people can also think in this term, but it's not like that at all. But he is I will explain it to you. Approve a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days. Plots have I laid. See that his villainy, his cruelty actually. He's already laid the plots to kill many people. He has already killed, and now he is planning to kill many others in order to dominate, in order to become king. So I laid, and by induction, dangers by drunken prophecies, um, libels, and dreams to set my brother Clarence and the king in deadly hate, the one against the other. And if King Edward, uh, kind of as true and just as I am, subtle, false, and treacherous. See, this is the revelation of his own character. So that's what beauty of Shakespearean soliloquies, that Richard himself explains that he is not going to be just like Edward IV, or he is just kind of cruel, and he is just very false and treacherous. As I remember Lady Macbeth, where she said that on the outside we must seem to be like just rose. Our face should look like the rose, but from inside we should be snake-like. So that is here actually. So, but here his mind is very clear. But same thing, this day should Clarence closely be mewed up, about a prophecy which spies that the G that is of Edward's heirs, the murder shall be. So dive kind of these down to my soul, Clarence. So then here comes the Clarence, and of course in next soliloquy, he makes the plan to marry, but there also he has a kind of point of deception actually. So he deceives. So that is why this soliloquy, of course, is very kind of different, and it shows portrays the kind of character of Richard, and he himself reveals his character, not no other character actually. So this is the beauty of this soliloquy. So that is why the kind of it's an evocative declaration, as I said in the beginning. Now is the kind of winter of our this can. So this soliloquy, of course, akin to a masterful portrayal, beckons us into a world of ambition, deception, and Machiavellian cunning. The Richard III itself is a kind of testament to Shakespeare's genius. Its roots deeply entwined with the historical canvas of the Wars of Roses. The play intricately weaves a narrative around the ascent and eventually fall of its eponymous character, Richard III, the Duke of Gloucester, who relentlessly pursues the power at any cost. This narrative resonates with the themes of power, ambition, and the consequences of unbridled desire, providing a profound exploration of the human condition. So, unbridled desires. So he had a lot of desires, and here Richard III differs from Machiavellian idea. I will explain to you. So desire and providing a profound exploration of the human condition. So Richard III's own physical disability adds yet another layer to this complex character, underscoring the depths of Shakespeare's storytelling. Richard himself proclaims, as I've said, I am determined to prove a villain. So this is a kind of determined to prove a villain because he cannot become a lover. So setting the stage for a character who rebels in his villainy, making him one of the Shakespeare's most complex, enduring creation. So his manipulation for deceit knows no bounds, as he boldly declares, and thus in I clothe my naked villainy, that are old ends stolen forth of holy writ, and seem a saint when most I play the devil. So that is from that is what Richard says later on. So he will not show himself as a devil, but he will always play as a devil. So this is what this is where I compare Lady Macbeth. She always played devil, but never ever disclosed. So that is the difference. This is the comparison. So now, when we see Machiavellian's ideology, so even Richard III surpasses Machiavellian idea of villainy. So as I said, Richard III, the kind of villain's opening kind of descent on his deformity can be perceived as having a much more pathetic quality to it. So here Richard catalogs the difficulties and social exclusions caused by his disabilities, describing himself as rudely stamped, deformed, unfinished. Such an kind of outpouring of self-loathing almost transformed this cunning boar into a victim worthy of our sympathy. So he tries to gain our sympathies. But when we read whole play, uh, we really we cannot sympathize with him at all actually, and even the people also start protesting um, him as a king actually. So in this soliloquy, it can be viewed as this soliloquy can be viewed as a Richard parroting the ugly and abusive taunts he has endured for years in present. So the modern time people can think in a kind of different way. That maybe a barrage of unseemly insults about Richard's shape that are partly responsible for the ugliness of his ensuing actions. So people may think in modern time because there are we talk about the disability rights and etc., and sometimes they charge because I have discussed with many people, some disabled people, and they say no, this is totally the negative idea of Shakespeare about the disability. And they say that kind of disability is mocked, and he's disabled. That's why he is a villain. But this is the uh, kind of Richard himself accepts it, that he is disabled, and therefore he cannot become a lover, and therefore he determines to become villain actually. So this is his acceptance, his revelation actually. So, but the kind of idea of disfigurement in the text, particularly in relation to the presentation of Shakespeare does not bother about the physical actually. It goes further. I also think so. So perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of this Richard's behavior, that is one that both delights and frustrates us, a refusal to fit neatly and attractively within the ideological boundaries. That will that would like him to. Uh, so modern readers, identify Richard as a classical, Machiavelli. Of course, like we think that he is just Machiavelli. Though Shakespeare, I'm not sure whether Shakespeare has read Machiavelli or not. I don't think so. But today we, of course, interpret Shakespeare, this Richard III, in Machiavellian terms, actually. At first glance, Richard's rampant self-interest, insatiable hunger to dominate, and willingness to commit heinous deeds might justify our view of Shakespeare crafting Richard into fulfill to fulfill the expectations of this trope. However, as the play progresses, Richard's actions disfigure Machiavellian ideas. And in the kind of as in the Prince, Machiavelli says, that uses the kind of conceit of flooding river to symbolize the uncontrollable nature of fortune, a chaotic force that man must try hard to master here. Master. So here, the symbol of swollen waters spilling beyond their boundaries seemed an equal pertinent description of Richard's ceaseless barbarity. According to the Prince, of course, it is suggested that for the aspiring politicians, cruel action can play an important role in achieving and maintaining power. However, such kind of such brutality needs to be enacted in one fell swoop. It should not be repeated again, or it should not be used as a device for securing the kind of power actually. So securing authority as tyrannous behavior of this kind is likely to invite protest. And because Richard has been committing many heinous crimes, murders, and ultimately people start protesting him. And then, of course, before he goes to the final battle, so all those whom he murdered actually they appear as a ghost, and they just come and he cries, but still he says, "No, I will fight." And ultimately, of course, he is killed. Of course, all of it. No, so that is why. So it is kind of there's a protest. People do not like him; they hate him. So cruelty, of course, in the Machiavellian universe is to be carefully and sparingly deployed. In its exploration of brutality, Richard III often draws on images of predatory acts. So character struggles to make sense of Richard's tyranny, which seems so deeply inhuman, and in their attempt to understand his thinking, rely on sorry, rely on references to pursuit and ferocity from the animal world, like bloodthirsty wolves, eagles, and kites. So, for example, for explanation, but there is an important difference to be made here. So, these natural acts of predation are indeed just that, natural. The seemingly vicious appetites of these beasts and their killing of the prey are part of an organic circle of life, like the archetypal Machiavelli's misdemeanors. So there is a kind of a clear purpose and design to such savagery. But as far as Richard is concerned, he does not have any clear design. So he has only power, nothing else. So Richard's kind of barbarism, however, is gratuitous. Richard is compelling figure because his physical damage and the kind of matched by complex psychological impairment. So psychological impairment. So there is no treatment of, there wasn't treatment for this psychological impairment. So it is not only the physical impairment, but he is psychological impaired person. So that's why his inner world is a wild and inhospitable terrain where ambition, misanthropy, hubris, and self-loathing are noted. So that is what Richard is actually. So it is only a kind of self-loathing. So whole that is kind of comes into this soliloquy, that he is self-loathed. Himself he loathes actually. He hates himself. So I will now conclude this kind of journey through the kind of complex of Richard thirds of portrayed in the play Richard III. So has illuminated the depths of Shakespeare's genius of the enduring allure of this timeless villain. So by delving into the opening soliloquy, we have unearthed the dark ambition and Machiavellian cunning that defines Richard's character, as he himself declared, he will he is determined to prove a villain, and throughout the play he lived up to this self-imposed decree. So throughout the play, I read the play, and throughout the play, you will see that he just follows this dictum. He himself decided actually that he will play a villain, nothing else. So Shakespeare, masterful storytelling, set against the backdrop of Richard's character,
So
as
you're
he himself
so you're
declared
requested
he
to cut
will
short your presentation. Richard, the person
he is
wants to cut short
determined
your
to
presentation.
prove a villain, and throughout the play,
Sir, you're
he
requested
lived up
to cut
to
short
this
your presentation.
self-imposed played the recording actually. Please switch it off. Throughout the play, yeah, I'm just throughout the play, you will see that he
Sir,
just
you're requested
follows
to cut
this.
it short, please.
Yeah, please, this stop this. Yeah, the Wars of the Roses. So weaves a kind of compelling narrative around power and consequences of unchecked desire. The soliloquy, not an opening opening monologue, but a key to understanding the multifaceted layers of Richard's character, serving as a thematic compass of the play. So, kind of,
Sir, requesting please.
yes, physical and charming
So please,
the
shorten your
uh,
presentation.
yeah, complexity of human nature. So this is what is about the kind of Richard actually, and this soliloquy particularly, and this totally is the explanation of the human nature, particularly about a deformed person who he himself thinks about this, and that's why he becomes a villain. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Professor Ramnivas. You have beautifully elaborated the pivotal role of soliloquy in Shakespeare's plays. You also presented a comparison between the two geniuses of their time, Shakespeare and Machiavelli. May I request the chair for this session, Professor Dahiya, to kindly come up? May I request Professor Dahiya for his concluding remarks for this? Okay. नहीं. Does anybody question? Does anybody has any more questions to any of the speakers? Okay, so we are now approaching towards the conclusion of this session, and again, as per the exigencies of the circumstances, I have to present a vote of thanks. First of all, I want to offer my heartfelt gratitude to each one present online and offline for bearing with technical glitches that happened earlier. It is deeply regretted, but your support is also appreciated. I have no words to thank all the expert speakers, Dr. Donald McManus, Professor Ashwin Malik, Professor Ram Nivas, and Professor Dahiya for sparing their time to be with us. My gratitude to my colleagues, particularly Dr. Mohita and Ms. Neelam for their contribution in conducting this session. A big thanks to technical staff and students for their support. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants for their patient and attentive listening. We all now for lunch. So for post-lunch sessions, technical session will run parallelly. Like yesterday, one will run here in the auditorium and the other technical session will run in the language lab. And we will announce the list of the participants shortly. Thank you all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.